Welcome back, everybody, to the CS Aviation Deep Dive.
Deep dive number 8.
That's right.
Yeah.
This time we are flying all over the globe.
All over the world, indeed.
Yeah, so we've got 3 main stops, but they're going to take us to some interesting spots, I think.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack today, so let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So first up, we're headed to Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
We talk a lot about airlines facing financial challenges.
Yeah.
This story is pretty extreme.
It is.
So the nation's civil aviation minister has publicly announced that both Air Niugini, their national carrier, and PNG Air, the second largest airline,
Uh-huh.
they owe a substantial amount of money to the state-owned airport operator.
Yeah, the airport operator is known as the National Airports Corporation, or NAC. They manage 22 airports across the country, including the major hub in Port Moresby.
Wow. And we're not talking about like a few $1,000s here.
No. We're
Wow.
talking big money. Over PGK 150 million, which translates to about USD 37.5 million.
$37.5 million. Wow.
That's a lot of money. And the NSC is claiming that this debt is hindering their ability to upgrade infrastructure at these airports.
Which, when you think about it, could have some pretty significant impacts on the passengers and on operations.
Safety, efficiency,
Yeah.
you name it.
But here's where it gets even more complicated.
Okay.
Both airlines are denying these claims.
They are pushing back, for sure. It's turning into a bit of a standoff.
So Air Niugini, being state-owned, says that they are engaged in discussions with the NXC.
Right.
And they're fulfilling their financial obligations.
Right.
But PNG Air, which is privately owned,
Uh-huh.
is taking a much stronger stance. They're saying that they've met all their requirements under a court-ratified creditor scheme.
So basically, they restructured their debt in a legally binding way.
Yeah. So 2 very different stories here.
Definitely makes you wonder what the real story is.
Right. What do you think is going on?
Well, it's tough to say for sure without having all the details about their financials and their agreements with the NAC. But it's important to remember that finances in the airline industry can get pretty complex.
For sure. And, I mean, what happens if this isn't resolved? I mean, we're talking about airport upgrades being put on hold.
Yeah.
I mean, that can have serious implications for safety.
Absolutely, for the efficiency of the airport.
Right. And what about the airlines? I mean, if they are struggling financially,
Yeah.
could that lead to route cuts, fleet reductions?
Potentially even bankruptcy in a worst-case scenario.
Right. So this is a situation I think we need to keep an eye on.
Definitely. The outcome could have huge implications for aviation in Papua New Guinea.
Okay, well, let's move on now.
Okay.
Let's head to Germany.
All right.
Lufthansa is getting ready for a big fleet upgrade.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one. They're getting the Boeing 777X.
That's right. You know, the long-awaited update to Boeing's iconic wide-body jet.
The one that's been delayed for what seems like forever.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like it's finally getting closer to takeoff.
It does.
And Lufthansa is still set to be the launch customer in 2026.
Interesting.
Now, this news comes straight from Boeing themselves, but
There's always a but.
there's a but. They did mention that there have been some seat challenges with Lufthansa.
Seat challenges? What does that even mean?
I know, right? They didn't really go into detail.
I wonder if it has something to do with Lufthansa's cabin configuration requests. They're known for their very high standards, especially when it comes to business and first class.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're asking for some, like, really over-the-top luxury features that are proving difficult to manufacture or design.
It's possible. Or maybe it has something to do with the overall layout of the 777X. This aircraft was designed for better fuel efficiency, so it's a little narrower than previous 777 models.
Okay.
So maybe that's causing some issues with Lufthansa's preferred seating arrangements.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's not forget that the 777X program itself has had a pretty bumpy ride.
That's an understatement. They had to ground the entire test fleet back in 2024 because of those thrust link failures.
Yeah. Which is a pretty critical component.
Yeah, those things connect the engine to the plane's structure and transfer the massive force from those powerful engines. So if they fail, you're talking about potentially the engine detaching.
Right. It's not good.
No, it's not good at all. Boeing definitely had to ground the fleet to figure out how to fix that.
And they say that those issues are being addressed.
They do.
But this news about the seat challenges does add another layer of uncertainty to the program.
It makes you wonder if it's going to further delay things.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's hop over to the U.S.
All right.
Southwest Airlines is expecting fewer deliveries of the Boeing 737 MAX in 2025.
Interesting. They haven't really explained why publicly, have they?
No. And that's what makes me think something else is going on.
Right.
because this comes right after Southwest sold and leased back 36 of their existing 737s.
Hmm. Do you think it's a strategic move to downsize their fleet in light of potential delays? Or are there other issues at play?
It's hard to say, but it does make you wonder.
It does. And don't forget, the U.S. Department of Transportation actually sued Southwest over delays last year.
Right. That lawsuit suggested that they might be dealing with some operational challenges.
Yeah, things like scheduling crew availability, logistical issues, anything that could affect their on-time performance.
So there's definitely more to this story, I think.
It's a situation we'll have to keep an eye on.
Okay, let's take our final flight now to Tajikistan.
All right.
So MAN Air is adding a new aircraft to their fleet, the Boeing 737-8.
Ah, the MEMX's more fuel-efficient cousin.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
They've signed a deal with DAE Capital for 2 of them,
Nice. And when are they expected to arrive?
2026.
So a little while yet.
Yeah, but what's really interesting is that MAN Air had considered the 737-8 back in 2019,
Oh, really?
but they put those plans on hold.
Well, I guess it makes sense. The MAGAX was grounded back then,
Mhm.
and then, of course, the pandemic hit.
Right. So it seems like now they're ready to move forward with those plans.
And they want to use these new 737-8s to launch flights to London.
That's right. Potentially with a stopover in Tbilisi, Georgia.
That's a big step for them, connecting Tajikistan to a major international hub.
It is. It's a pretty bold move.
Definitely shows their confidence in the aviation industry's recovery.
It does make you think about all the possibilities that open up when an airline expands its network like that.
Absolutely. You're talking about boosting tourism, trade, cultural exchange. It's a big deal.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that aviation is about so much more than just getting from point A to point B.
It's about connecting people and places.
Exactly. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to the Boeing 777X for a minute.
Okay.
You know those seat challenges that we talked about earlier?
Yes. The mysterious seat challenges.
They didn't give us any specifics,
Oh, well,
which leaves us with a lot of questions.
it does.
So what do you think could be causing these challenges?
Well, it could be something as simple as supply chain issues.
Right. We know those have been plaguing a lot of industries.
Absolutely. Even a minor disruption in the supply chain can have huge knock-on effects.
And when you're talking about a complex aircraft like the 777X, which has already been delayed,
Yeah.
even something seemingly small like seats could push things back even further.
And, Lufthansa is probably really eager to get their hands on these new planes.
Of course.
They want to start taking advantage of the fuel efficiency and the increased passenger capacity,
Right. Any delays could put them at a disadvantage compared to their competitors.
especially on those long-haul routes where every little bit of efficiency counts.
Yeah. So while we don't have all the details yet, those seat challenges are definitely worth watching.
Agreed.
Okay, now let's shift gears back to Southwest Airlines for a moment.
Okay.
We talked about their reduced 737 MAX deliveries in 2025
Uh-huh.
and all the potential reasons behind that decision.
Right.
What do you think this means for Southwest's future?
Well, on the one hand, it could be a sign that they're being cautious.
Okay.
Maybe they're adjusting their growth plans because of the operational challenges they've been having or because of uncertainty in the market.
Right, like taking a step back to make sure everything is in order.
Exactly. But on the other hand, it could be a strategic move to free up some cash.
Okay. How so?
Well, they could use that money to upgrade their existing fleet.
Okay.
Maybe retrofit some older planes with more fuel-efficient engines or update their cabin interiors. Or they could invest in new technologies that would help them become more efficient.
So it's not necessarily about shrinking, but more about optimizing what they already have.
Exactly. And in the long run, that could be a smarter strategy than just expanding rapidly.
Yeah. It's like the old saying, sometimes you have to take a step back to take 2 steps forward.
I like that. And in the aviation industry, being adaptable is key.
For sure. The airlines that can adjust to change are the ones that are going to thrive.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about the financial side of the industry today.
We have debts acquisitions expansions.
Right, but what about the human element?
That's a good point. Behind all these numbers and transactions are real people.
Pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, baggage handlers.
And of course, the passengers.
It's their experiences and their safety that ultimately matter most.
You're absolutely right.
I think it's important to remember that as we watch this industry change and evolve,
It's not just about profits and losses.
it's about connecting people and cultures.
And making the world a smaller place.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really does show how one thing can affect something totally different, on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and I think this next topic really highlights that too. So let's go back to Lufthansa and the 777X.
Okay.
Specifically those seat challenges that Boeing mentioned.
Right. They were really vague about it, weren't they?
Super vague, which of course makes me even more curious.
Well, it's got to be something.
Right. What do you think it could be?
Well, maybe it has something to do with the actual design of the seats. Like maybe Lufthansa has some really specific requirements that are hard to make work with the layout of the 777X's cabin.
Yeah, that's possible. Lufthansa is known for having those really nice cabins, especially in business and first class.
Exactly. So maybe they're trying to push the boundaries with some new innovative seat designs or features, and maybe that's causing some problems for the manufacturers.
Yeah, or maybe it's not even the seats themselves. Maybe it's the supply chain.
Oh, that's a good point.
Hmm.
We've been hearing about how supply to chain issues are affecting so many industries.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be surprising if that's impacting Boeing as well.
Yeah, even just a small disruption in the supply chain can cause a huge ripple effect.
Right. Imagine if they're missing like one tiny component
Hmm.
that they need for the seats. It could delay the whole delivery timeline.
And the 777X has already been delayed so much.
Right.
I'm sure both Boeing and Lufthansa are eager to avoid any further setbacks.
Totally. So yeah, those seat challenges are definitely something to watch. Okay, so before we wrap up for today, I want to circle back to Southwest Airlines.
All right.
We talked about the reduced 737 MX deliveries in 2025 and all the possible reasons for that.
Right.
What do you think this means for Southwest's future?
Well, it could be a sign that they're just being cautious.
Right.
Maybe they're adjusting their growth plans a bit because of those operational challenges they've been facing,
Right.
or maybe because of the uncertainty in the market overall.
Right, like taking a breather to regroup.
Exactly. But it could also be a strategic move.
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to free up some cash.
Okay, how so?
Well, they could use that money to invest in other areas of their business.
Oh.
Like they could upgrade their existing fleet, maybe retrofit some of those older planes with more fuel-efficient engines,
Right.
or they could update the cabins, make them more modern, or they could invest in new technology that would help them be more efficient overall.
So it's not necessarily about downsizing. It's about optimizing what they already have.
Right. Exactly. And in the long run, that might actually be a smarter move than just focusing on rapid expansion.
Yeah, it's like that saying, sometimes you have to take a step back to take two steps forward.
Exactly. And in the airline industry, you have to be able to adapt. That's key.
For sure. The airlines that can adapt to change are the ones that are going to succeed.
Couldn't agree more.
It makes you wonder if this might become a trend,
Oh.
with all the uncertainty in the global economy and the aviation industry.
Yeah.
Maybe more airlines will start taking this more cautious, strategic approach.
It's possible. We've seen it happen before,
Right.
When one big airline makes a major change, others tend to follow suit.
So this is something we'll definitely want to keep an eye on.
For sure. And it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know how everything in the aviation industry is interconnected.
Exactly. One airline's decision can have ripple effects throughout the whole system.
Like a domino effect.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up our deep dive today, what are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should remember?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that adaptability is essential in this industry.
Okay.
Whether it's adjusting fleet plans, exploring new routes, or navigating financial challenges, being able to adapt to change is crucial for success.
And it seems like those changes are happening faster and faster all the time.
Absolutely. Look at Soman Air and the Boeing 737-8. A few years ago, that plane was grounded facing a very uncertain future.
Right.
Now it's going to be a key part of their expansion plans.
It's pretty amazing. And then you have Southwest facing all those challenges.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to pause and reassess to set yourself up for long-term success.
Exactly. And, Southwest has a history of overcoming challenges and coming out stronger. I'm sure they'll figure this out and continue to be a major player in the U.S. market.
Okay, so before we sign off,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a question. We've talked a lot about the financial side of things today.
We have debts, acquisitions, expansions.
Right. But what about the human element?
That's a good point. Behind all those numbers are real people.
Right.
Pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, baggage handlers, and
Yeah.
of course the passengers.
Right. Their experiences,
Uh,
their safety. That's what really matters at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So as we watch this industry evolve,
Uh-huh.
let's not forget about the people who make it all happen.
Well said.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does. When you think about all the people involved and how their jobs are getting even more demanding with all these challenges the industry is facing.
Yeah, you've got the pilots having to learn to fly these new aircraft like the 777X.
Right.
and the mechanics who have to keep those 737 MAXs in the air.
Yeah, it's a constant learning curve for everyone.
And then you have the passengers who are also dealing with a lot of changes.
Oh, absolutely. Longer security lines, more expensive, tickets delays because of operational issues or air traffic control problems.
Yeah, it makes you really appreciate all those people working behind the scenes.
It does.
Right.
Like folks who are doing their best to make sure everything runs smoothly and safely.
Right, all those ground crews and air traffic controllers.
Yeah, they're the unsung heroes of aviation.
They really are.
Yeah.
So, thinking about all this, do you think these financial pressures and operational challenges are going to end up affecting the average traveler?
That's a good question. It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely possible. We've already seen airlines raising fares and cutting back on amenities because of fuel costs and other economic factors.
Right.
And if that continues, it could make flying a lot less enjoyable and a lot more expensive.
Not to mention more delays if airlines have to cut corners or reduce staff to save money.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act for them. They need to keep passengers happy while also keeping their business afloat.
Okay, so as we wrap up our 8th CAS Aviation Deep Dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that the aviation industry is constantly changing. There are so many moving parts, and they're all connected in some way. And as we've seen, change can come from anywhere, whether it's a financial issue in Papua New Guinea, a new route being launched into Tajikistan, or a design problem with the Boeing 777X.
It's what makes following this industry so fascinating. You just never know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it, and it keeps us coming back for more.
Well said. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this journey through the world of aviation. We'll be back soon with another CAS Aviation Deep Dive. Until then, safe travels, everyone.